The reason I chose this article is because I have a desire to go into constitutional law, and so I thought this was perfectly fitting for my career choice and relative to this class because it is all about, experimental design data. So this article talks about how people evaluate their own state constitutions along with the U.S. Constitution. It explores public perceptions of these constitutions and has the overall question of how does the age, amendment rate, and length of a constitution affect how people view it. People usually tend to trust court decisions more when they are based on recent constitutional changes because those rules feel more legitimate and reflect current public values. This goes right along with the next point that the American public might view the U.S. Supreme Court differently if it were interpreting a younger or more frequently amended constitution. We know that our constitution was written in 1787, so a lot of people view those principles and even some of the amendments as outdated or not current. And so respondents in this study tend to show greater support for original intent interpretation when presented with a younger constitution. So this study has tests a series of 5 hypotheses, but they all center around the same independent and dependent variable. The independent variable is the features of the Constitution shown to respondents, in this case the age and the amendment rate of the Constitution. And the dependent variable is how respondents support for the judicial review of said constitutions. The study uses a Vinet experiment where they ask the respondents to evaluate a state court's invalidation of a specific statute from 1 very inappropriate to 4 very appropriate. And there's also a conjoint analysis thrown in there as well. The ordinary least squares confirms that respondents show more support for judicial invalidation of a policy they personally oppose. The p-value here is 0.01. Respondents are also more favorable toward judicial invalidation when the court relies on a more recent adopted provision. So it makes sense that people are more likely to support a judge striking down a law if they don't agree with the law. But what was surprising in this study is how, even though if people agree with the law, they are more willing to support a judge striking it down if the judge uses a newer part of the Constitution to do it. And as we saw on the previous slide, the p-values of 0.01, there is a statistically significant linear relationship between constitutional age and increased preference for originalist interpretation. So some shortcomings of the article that I found was that the article doesn't always clearly report effect size for all variables. Some features like amendment rate, the researchers did show the significance, but there was less discussion of magnitude in all states. There also was the experiment used hypothetical scenarios instead of real-life scenarios. So the real-world external validity may be limited. The researchers could include, do people's reactions to these hypothetical constitutions map onto actual behavior in real constitutional litigation contexts? There also was no exploration of interaction effects, so there may be more complex relationships that have been left unexplored. Some ways to increase and add to this study is increasing the sample size. So the original sample size was 1,978 U.S. adults. However, after a series of test questions, some of the adults were let go of the study, thus reducing the sample size. However, the article does not lay out what the new sample size was, so encouraging researchers to dismiss certain participants, but still bringing in participants to keep that sample size number up. There also needs to be an integration of real-world behavioral data, so using actual recorded rates of judicial invalidation and cross-validating that with self-reported data. This will help increase external validity and link survey findings to constitutional practice. Thanks so much for watching, and hopefully you learned as much as I did.